Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. They're the same picture.
Monster Hunter Wilds, currently the best-selling game of 2025 in the US, while simultaneously having almost 150,000 negative reviews on Steam. We haven't seen such a successful unoptimized rug pull since Cyberpunk 2077. It's no secret that Monster Hunter Wilds was a technical disaster at launch on PC, so why 7 months after release is it still not under control? Is it really just a case of a greedy publisher and lazy developers? Well, definitely things to consider. We need to go deeper to find out the whys to the whys, because like most things, there's more nuance to it than that. And optimization isn't the only contributing factor to Monster Hunter's self-imposed predicament it's found itself in. So let's talk about what really happened to Capcom's most disliked best-selling game. Leading up to the release of Monster Hunter Wilds, Capcom had created a lot of that pre-launch hype. It was clear that Capcom were going all in on Wilds with their marketing for the game, attempting to broaden its reach beyond just its existing fanbase. They had devs showcasing the game, playable demos at events, an open beta for everyone to try, and trailers. So many trailers. On top of that, the game had a lot of reach thanks to word of mouth, the best form of marketing in my opinion. Monster Hunter's always had a dedicated fan base, and with Monster Hunter World bringing so many of us into the franchise, there were a lot of people advocating for Wilds. For new players, it felt like the perfect entry point to get their feet wet. But while everyone was excited and blissfully unaware, behind the scenes, Capcom were planning the biggest heist they'd ever attempted, doing everything they could to hit their yearly financial milestones before the fiscal year ended on the 31st of March. They had two goals in particular: to achieve record high net sales and profit at all levels for the 8th consecutive year, as well as achieve over 10% operating income growth for its 10th consecutive year. And that's exactly what they did, in part due to the success of Monster Hunter Wilds. In a Capcom press release, they said the following: during the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2025, Capcom's core digital contents business drove results, delivering annual sales of 51.87 million units, an increase of over 5 million units from the previous year, with the release of Monster Hunter Wilds, which sold over 10 million units in 1 month, as well as strong catalog titles led by the Monster Hunter series. As a result, Capcom achieved record high net sales and profit at all levels for the 8th consecutive year, as well as over 10% operating income growth for its 10th consecutive year. What a coincidence they happened to release Wilds a month before the fiscal year ended when those milestones needed to be met. But there's no way they'd push out a game before it was ready just to meet those silly little financial goals that would look very nice to investors. Sarcasm! And can you guess what their 2026 financial goals are? That's right, to keep the kill streak going. That seems sustainable. Sarcasm! With the pre-launch momentum Wilds had gained, it shot this game into the stratosphere, reaching an all-time peak of almost 1.4 million players on Steam when it released at the tail end of February, which is 4 times higher than Monster Hunter World, and this doesn't even factor in the console player base. Within 3 days, it had sold 8 million copies, which is fucking bonkers. Capcom was sitting pretty, quickly hitting their financial goals and then some. It's fair to say that the floodgates had opened up, sending Monster Hunter to a mainstream level that had never seen before. People were pouring in, with both new and existing fans hyped to experience Monster Hunter's next evolution.
Welcome to Jurassic Park. It's a dinosaur.
You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could, and before you even knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling it. You're going to sell it. Well,
that is one big pile of shit.
It became immediately apparent that this game had not been optimized for PC, with terrible frame rates, shader issues, high CPU loads, crashes. You know, just all the hallmarks of an unoptimized game, you name it, Wilds had it. To be fair, there were plenty of red flags leading up to the release of Wilds, the beta running poorly, the unreasonably high minimum specs that required frame generation, the state of Dragon's Dogma 2 on PC. But despite its performance issues, it still received high scores from most critics, whatever that's worth nowadays. It ain't worth shit! And it sold gangbusters, with 50% of those initial sales coming from Steam alone. Now, there's a lot to say about why this game is so unoptimized, which we'll get to, but suffice to say, after the players flooded in, so did the negative reviews. Thousands upon thousands of them coming in on a daily basis. Not all of them were just about its poor performance, but a lot of the issues Wilds had as a game were overshadowed by its terrible PC port that, for many, prevented players from even experiencing the game. As March went on and reviews came in, Wilds lost a staggering amount of players, and by the time April came, it had gone from just under 1.4 million players to just over 200,000 players on Steam. Of course, a drop-off in players is typical for a game after release, and is realistically the only direction a game can go, no matter how hard AAA publishers wish it wasn't true. Some of that drop-off, no doubt, was because some players were content with completing the story and moving on. Monster Hunter isn't a live service in a typical sense. They usually get one large paid expansion after release with updates sprinkled in between. A lot of the players will get their fill then come back when the game receives more updates. But losing 1.2 million players in a month leads me to believe that maybe something else is going on here. You'll notice that around the end of May, lots of negative reviews started to come in, and that's because of this patch, which released on the 28th of May. The update added some fun things like more tempered monsters, Akuma from Street Fighter, and your own personal campfire to roast marshmallows on. The update had caused a shader compilation issue that was extremely taxing on CPUs and significantly impacted frame rates, which is just another spit in the face of PC players, whether it was intentional or not, creating more issues than before the patch had released. This prompted Capcom to post a tweet on how to delete shader cache files, which only pissed everyone off even more, effectively making players fix the issue Capcom had caused themselves. And deleting the files didn't necessarily improve a lot of players' performance issues, essentially reverting it back to what it was before the update. The next update released on the 30th of June, claiming to fix the shader issues and remedy the months of poor optimization that had been plaguing the game since launch. And this is when one of the most commercially successful games of 2025 sat at overwhelmingly negative from recent reviews on Steam, because the update did not fix the performance issues. At the same time this was all going on, Capcom took a strong stance against mods by suspending accounts. This was because people were accessing content that had not yet been released, which I guess is a reasonable thing, but the timing couldn't have been worse. This was the breaking point. Despite being out for months, the game's optimizations weren't being fixed, and the PC players had had enough at that point, dropping those review bombs left, right, and center. Fast forward to today, and things have only gotten worse for the game. Right now, Monster Hunter Wilds is sitting at just under 150,000 negative reviews on Steam, a clear statement made by PC players. It has a 24-hour peak of 20,000 players at the time of recording, which is by no means a small number, but it's all relative. That's less than 2% of its all-time peak player count. If we look at Monster Hunter World in comparison, we can see that at the same 7-month time period after release, 10% of the total concurrent players were still playing at that time. That means that World was able to retain 5 times more players than Wilds. Now it's important to note that this doesn't factor at all into the console player base. PC and console have always been segregated from one another, and these statistics are probably not reflective of how the game's performing on PS5 and Xbox, especially considering that the poor optimization issue is exclusive to PC and runs fine on consoles. Well, for console standards. But it still begs the question, how did we get here? I mean, obviously the game's performance issues still haven't been rectified, but why is that? Why hasn't it been fixed? Is it because Capcom already got their bag after selling millions of copies and they've just ridden off into the sunset? I mean, it certainly looks that way. Are the devs just being lazy and don't care about the game? I don't think so. Here's my best bet. From a high level, these are the reasons why I think the game still runs like ass. And to preface, I'm not saying that what they've done is acceptable. I'm not defending or condoning selling an unfinished product for $70. I'm just trying to provide potential reasons as to why this has happened. So first is over-ambition. Monster Hunter is a franchise built on iteration. Every new game keeps a lot of core mechanics from previous Monster Hunters, but they also introduce a few new mechanics that make that particular game unique among its predecessors. It's one of the reasons why Monster Hunter is so great. It's this ideation process that gives these games so much depth, and I respect the hell out of the developers for innovating, experimenting, and trying new things in an industry that loves to copy and paste. But this can also be a double-edged sword, and is where I think Monster Hunter Wilds bit off way more than it could chew. There are a number of innovations and additions that Wilds brings to the franchise, but the major problematic one is its open world format. You see, in Monster Hunter World you had a hub where you could accept quests, then you'd be taken to whatever biome that hunt would take place in via a loading screen. But Wilds opted to remove loading screens and have all the camps and biomes seamlessly traversable. In my opinion, this was a huge mistake. Here's what I said in my review.
You can move seamlessly between different biomes with no loading screens if you really want to, but I mean, why would you, when you can just fast travel? I found myself going back to base camp and starting quests that way, and in fact, I never actually traveled between the different biomes once. It's a nice addition, but I think it's one that I could have lived without, given the poor performance that it contributes towards.
Wilds and World are very similar games on paper. Graphically they look similar, mechanically they're near identical with small tweaks here and there, and the biomes themselves are similar in size, maybe slightly smaller in World. But there are two differentiating aspects between the two that stand out to me. The first one is the engine they use, which we'll talk about in a minute, but the second is the way they handle loading. I am by no means a game developer, but there are developers explaining this issue in greater detail, and it doesn't take a genius to realize that removing loading screens is going to have implications. The shit part is, it doesn't even enhance the core gameplay loop, and is more of a marketing gimmick and a slight quality of life improvement. Even if it was the best shit since sliced bread, it wouldn't change anything. I would far rather have a game that has loading screens that runs at a stable frame rate. The most important aspect of any game is that it's playable. I talked about this in my graphics video about the hierarchy of needs. If a game doesn't run, then everything else becomes redundant. In an attempt to evolve the game, they flew too close to the sun. The reason I think they haven't fixed all these issues is because they can't. Whatever is causing these problems, it's obviously so deeply woven into the DNA of this game that it can't be fixed, at least not within the 7 months that it's been out. The other side to this is the RE engine itself, which is the engine that was used to develop Wilds. It's becoming more apparent that the RE engine just isn't suited for open world games, at least not on PC. Most of the games that have been developed on the RE engine are more linear experiences. Games that are in smaller environments and enclosed spaces. The latest Resident Evils, Devil May Cry 5, Street Fighter 6. The only two open world games that have been developed on the RE engine so far is Monster Hunter Wilds and Dragon's Dogma 2. Is it a coincidence that both these games are now notorious for their shitty PC ports? Perhaps. Either way, the correlation is interesting. What I find strange is that these games are able to run okay on consoles but not on PC, suggesting that whatever the issue is, it isn't something that affects every platform across the board. Game engines often excel in specific areas, especially proprietary engines which are tweaked to fit the very specific needs of a developer. And a great example of this is actually Monster Hunter World. You see, Monster Hunter World wasn't built on the RE engine, it was built on its predecessor, MT Framework. In an interview published by Edge magazine, producer Ryozo Sugimoto explained the team's reasoning behind the choice to use MT Framework and not the RE engine. There are some things you can only do in MT Framework that really benefit Monster Hunter. The series has really influenced the development of MT Framework, so the custom toolsets available in the engine suit Monster Hunter development really well. It really just made sense to stick with the engine which is made by and which makes Monster Hunter. This statement really speaks for itself, but obviously the MT Framework engine had toolsets in place to make development easier and smoother for Monster Hunter games. Of course, Monster Hunter Rise was developed in the RE engine, but that was originally designed for the Switch and was nowhere near as graphically demanding as World. Not only that, a lot of the improvements RE Engine has over MT Framework are graphical and rendering techniques, things like subsurface scattering and dynamic shadows. That's how Capcom are able to get jaw-dropping graphical fidelity with their most recent games. It's just speculation, but the fact that Wilds is having so many texture and shader issues could be in part due to the graphical improvements that the RE Engine has over MT Framework. Just food for thought. And this leads into the next reason, which is that developers lack the experience of porting a Monster Hunter game over to PC. Think about it, World was the first Monster Hunter game to be officially released on PC. Every single Monster Hunter before that was pretty much made exclusively for one console, meaning that each game could be catered to the specifications of their respective consoles. They never had to contend with the near infinite PC configurations until World. Not only that, World was the first game in the franchise to push its graphical fidelity. It wasn't being developed on Nintendo's potato consoles and wasn't as constrained by hardware limitations. People might not remember, but when World released on PC, it experienced similar performance issues to Wilds. It was review bombed just like Wilds, but with a few key differences. First was that it didn't release on PC at the same time as consoles. They took an extra 7 whole months to get the PC port in better shape before shipping it.
PC 版ですね。こちらの方ですがですね、今頑張って作っておりまして、2018年の秋頃に But
Wilds didn't do that, likely due to the financial milestones that had to be met by the end of March. Second is that yes, it did suffer performance and online connectivity issues, but they were resolved fairly promptly, at least in comparison to Wilds. The negative reviews for World tapered off 2 weeks after launch, and now it sits at very positive. But with Wilds, I think they just got too ambitious, overwhelmed, and likely forced to release the game before it was ready. On top of that, console was clearly prioritized over PC. Like I said, every single Monster Hunter before World was pretty much made exclusively for one console. Whether it was for the PS2, the PSP, or the various Nintendo consoles, this is what Monster Hunter was built on and built for. It's where the core player base originated from. Wilds was almost certainly developed for consoles first, with PC as an afterthought. A tale as old as time at this point, but now a huge portion of the fanbase comes from PC, a lot of them being existing Monster Hunter fans that prefer to play games on their computer given the option. I think Capcom severely underestimated just how many people would be playing on PC. We also can't deny the fact that it's extremely likely the developers were forced to release this game before it was ready, because of those financial milestones that they were so desperate to hit. And this is where I think it's important to distinguish the difference between Capcom as a publisher and the team that develops Monster Hunter. I truly believe the developers of Monster Hunter love this franchise and put their heart and soul into each game. Ryozo Tsujimoto worked on almost every single Monster Hunter game. This is his life's work at this point. Yuya Tokura, same deal, contributed to Monster Hunter from very early on. I think it's a fair assumption to say that they want this game to be amazing. The developers may have made mistakes with Wilds outside of optimization, which I'm about to constructively criticize, but whatever decisions they make come from a place of good intentions, even when they're forced to adhere to an unreasonable deadline. Before I do talk about the problems myself and many others have with Wilds, I want to talk about the Monster Hunter fans, new and old. Monster Hunter enthusiasts are very passionate and opinionated when it comes to the series, often being very vocal when the devs do something they don't like. Alatreon and Fatalis, I'm looking at you. And that's because of how much players care about these games. But your opinion on Monster Hunter is hugely dependent on what previous Monster Hunter games you have played, what your favorite one is, and what order you played them in. Your history with the franchise, or lack thereof, will directly affect your reference points and comparabilities to Wilds. With every new Monster Hunter release, it becomes a comparison game. Well, this Monster Hunter did this, therefore it's better, or this Monster Hunter changed what I liked about this Monster Hunter, therefore it's worse. Now, I want to be clear, your opinion is your own and is as valid as anybody else's opinion. It isn't right or wrong, it just is. For example, I was introduced to Monster Hunter with World, and this has been hugely influential on my negative thoughts towards Wilds. But for many veterans of the series, their previous experiences influenced their negative thoughts towards World when it released. This means that what Monster Hunter's identity is specific to the player. This is why I don't envy the developers, because it's impossible to please every Monster Hunter fan, no matter what they do, which leaves the devs trying to hit Goldilocks zones that don't exist, or pick a lane and let one side down. My point in all of this is that, putting optimization aside, if Wilds was the first ever Monster Hunter game to come out, I don't think anyone would say it's a bad game. I don't think Wilds is a bad game if you really look at what it has to offer. The problem is that this game doesn't exist in a vacuum and has to at least match or surpass the extremely high bar set by the previous games, and a lot of existing Monster Hunter fans feel like it doesn't, including myself. Hiding among the sea of negative reviews about optimization are vocal Monster Hunter fans expressing their grievances with Wilds as a game. The two biggest complaints about the game, besides performance, is a lack of difficulty and a lack of friction. A lot of players feel like it's drifted too far away from its core identity. The difficulty issues are more than just monster health pools and damage output. Power creep from the last two Monster Hunter games has reached its peak with Wilds. The amount of tools at your disposal and the evolution of the weapons makes you feel like a god among men, and the monsters are nothing but an inconvenience. Focus mode and wounds, sacrets, palicos, new weapon techniques. We're so powerful now, it feels like we're the predators that the monsters should be scared of and not the other way around. The developer's solution to this is by introducing more challenging monsters, but it's really just a band-aid for more underlying core gameplay issues. The monster dial is being cranked to compensate for the real problem, the hunters. The lack of friction takes away the inconveniences that made players engage and connect with the environments and the monsters that inhabit them, replaced with a more frictionless autopilot experience. In an attempt to appeal to a broader audience, a lot of players feel like Capcom have sanded away the rough edges that made Monster Hunter Monster Hunter. I think Wild's core issues are why a lot of people aren't satisfied with the updates and the in-game structure. Wilds doesn't give enough incentive for players to stay engaged because the game doesn't want you to stay engaged, it just wants you to press a button and be ferried off to the next monster. It creates this disconnect and breaks immersion by making players feel separated from everything within the world, like we're just watching it all through a window rather than living in it ourselves. This feeling bleeds into the in-game and makes updates feel less impactful. It's hard to pin down exactly, but something just feels off about Wilds. For me, I just don't feel that spark, that feeling that made me put hundreds of hours into World without even realizing it. All of this isn't helped by the fact that while the game is setting PCs on fire, they're still releasing things like the branded Fender collaboration. Capcom really put themselves in an awkward position because they obviously have to keep updates coming out, but when the game won't run on PC, releasing content updates just pisses people off and puts into question their priorities, even though these updates were likely in the pipeline well before Wild's initial release. It also makes you wonder how much development output has been taken away from updates to focus on stabilizing the game. What this has all led to is the existing Monster Hunter fans, the ones with hundreds or thousands of hours in previous games, to turn away. They're going back to older Monster Hunters or just playing other games. It's created this perfect concoction of ingredients to kill the best-selling game of 2025. You have the old players who are turning away because the game strayed too far from its roots, and you have the new and old players turning away because of the optimization ruining anything the game has to offer, leaving only the very dedicated players that like Wilds despite its flaws and performance issues. All of Capcom's solutions to the problems Wild has feel like band-aids. The game's too easy because we made you too powerful? I don't know, here's some harder monsters. Performance issues? Did you try turning your computer off and on? I don't think this has ruined Monster Hunter forever or anything like that, but I do think they've done irreparable harm to the Monster Hunter franchise. Wilds will always be a painful reminder of how Monster Hunter appealed to no one and how PC players were treated as second-class citizens. And it fucking sucks, man. I released a video earlier this year talking about how great Capcom were doing. So Capcom, please don't fuck this up. Oh, past me, how naive you were. But such is the nature of Capcom, a company that always seems to contradict itself. Capcom, good!
Capcom bad.
Capcom good.
Capcom bad.
The Capcom roller coaster continues. I'll probably make another video when RE9 releases about how Capcom is so back. It's the circle of life. Despite their missteps, I do still think Capcom are doing great things, and I want nothing but success for Monster Hunter, but unfortunately, this ain't it. I feel for the devs, I really do, and I bet the last 7 months haven't been kind to them, but at the same time, this is a product that we paid $70 for. All the anger being vocalized through the negative reviews on Steam is justified if people don't feel satisfied with the game that they've bought. That's the whole point of a review. I usually try to end my videos on a more positive note, try and find the silver lining in whatever I'm talking about, but I got nothing on this one, if I'm being honest. I can only hope that the next paid expansion can do what Iceborne did for Monster Hunter World and renew Wilds by giving us something truly enticing. But like I said, a lot of the game's problems are core gameplay elements that can't be easily changed. I really think these issues can't be fixed until we get a new Monster Hunter game. I just hope that the developers at Capcom can take a step back and think long and hard about what made their previous games so great. Capcom, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. Show us that you can create a game that functions. Show us that you can create a game that Monster Hunter fans can truly advocate for. I guess the real lesson to be learned here is don't fuck with PC players. I appreciate you.